Okay, so we are recording week 5. Again, we'll post this obviously after the class. What I'd like to do is just go down the list, I think. And Ben, are you online? Are you able to speak? Ben Panetta? Okay, Lydia, we'll start with you then.
Yeah, I can speak.
So, okay, so tell me a bit about your your ideas on cloud sharing and BIM authoring tools. So I'd like to get your thoughts on your familiarity with them prior to us doing the lecture portion.
Okay, for the cloud sharing, I know there are like several types for sharing. One is it's a cloud server. It's somewhere, whatever where, and just everyone can put like the final model, so that everyone can see, even if we are not in the same location.
Okay.
And there are another one which is local, I know, or something like that, but it's not cloud. I mean, it's a sharing server.
Right. Have you used any in your experience, like for BIM authoring?
No.
No. Okay. 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 Ravi, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on cloud sharing solutions and BIM authoring for WIP?
Same as Lydia, there are several resources for collaboration. Like we can work on same project sitting on different parts of the country, and there are several means of collaboration like cloud, and we can share on local server, and that's it.
Do you have experiences from either from previous work or no?
No.
Okay. Victor?
Yeah.
Some thoughts?
So, cloud sharing, the solutions that I put were A360, which is, for the files and everything. The drop, which I have used only for renderings and some simple, sharing models and everything. Box and Dropbox I use mainly for file sharing, uploading and downloading. But the interesting thing is Box lets you put comments, and they have the new versions of the file. So if you upload a file with the same name, it's going to show like version 2 or version 3, and you can actually access the previous versions. I put another one that I don't have a lot of knowledge of, and I actually forgot the name. If you can bring it up on the screen. Yeah, the FM system, I'm not I don't know a lot about. The BIM Cloud, I read that it started in Japan, and it's not compatible with Revit. It's from the same company as the ArchiCAD, I believe.
Right. Cool. And FM systems is interesting because that's one we've explored on the asset management side. So that was interesting that you poked at that one there. That was cool.
And the BIM-ins, I didn't quite understand, but I put that we can collaborate using the cloud or a local server.
Okay. Cool. And we're going to be expanding on that for the work in progress today. So back to Ben, are you online with the microphone, or are you just not going to be able to? Okay, it looks like he still doesn't have the microphone. Sudhan Raj, Do you have any comments you'd like to share on sorry, let me go back to here, on cloud sharing or BIM authoring for work in progress?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. No, but thank you. Usually, when I start my studies in Algonquin, that time I heard about A360.
Right.
That's only we are using in a, I mean, some details I've heard about in a class, and also basically I'm using Dropbox. It's not too much data RAM, so I just heard about those things.
Okay.
Not experience. I mean, familiar with that one.
The A360 piece, are you using more for just file sharing or for full Revit collaboration? What was your experience with that?
We did that in the classroom, Revit collaboration. I mean,
okay, cool.
Yeah,
okay. Awesome. And this is what Ben had put up. I'm assuming Ben, he's having the microphone issues, so that's cool. Gonna have to fix that microphone, Ben. But he brought up Autodesk Formit, which was definitely interesting because it's a similar backbone technology of the A360 for the online sharing, but a full modeling software more for like sketch-based early concept. And it was introduced at AU. Goodness, I want to say maybe back in 2012. So it's pretty cool. You can do some quick online collaborative sketching and then push it into, I think it just goes straight into Revit. And then BIM Collab is another one. It's a system that's solely for the BFC, which is the BIM collaboration file format. So it's governed by Building Smart. So that's good. This is how I really want to start all the classes, just to get a taste of where you guys fit relative to the subject matter before I jump automatically into just presenting. Now, what I was going to do is, before I do the presentation, I did want to show you all some of the various tools. And some of these I am going to mention in the presentation, but some I'm not. So I thought it would be cool just for you to see these live in an active environment. These are all the ones that IBI has at their disposal. And you can just see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 8 tabs along the top, and it's mind-boggling. And that's not including local servers and stuff like that. But we do have, like, these are all the cloud-based ones. So our Office 365, we create project SharePoint sites, allows us to place models online, having a task-based summary, calendars, announcements, contact list, really strong integration with our Office, obviously, because it's all Office. So it's really good to send things into your Outlook calendar, accessing Active Directory for the people in the firm and all that. Gets a little dodgy, if you will, when you're trying to add a bunch of externals, because it's Office 365, if I wanted to add all of you to it, you would all need an Office account, or your email address would have to be registered with Office or with Microsoft. And it gets a little confusing when you're adding in Gmails and stuff like that. But, you know, or if you're adding in a Hotmail or an Outlook account that's already attached to another enterprise Office account. So little fun on that end, but you know, that's one system we have. And after the presentation, I'll pop back to these. As you guys mentioned, the Box account. So IBI does have an enterprise Box account, kind of smaller in scope, because there's a lot of things that Box does that SharePoint already does. SharePoint comes with Office, with our enterprise Office. Box does not. So again, we weigh cost, and I love when I get Box and Microsoft at the table together and I say, okay, tell me why I should pay for one versus the other. Box has cool things, SharePoint has cool things, you know. Box used to have a strong claim to fame with the sync to desktop. So you have the Box sync app like you do for Dropbox and OneDrive, but now the SharePoint sites, these Office SharePoint sites connect to OneDrive to Business. So they're competing very heavily with each other. AConnex is one that I don't really get into in the presentation, but just to show you, this is more of our shared and published type things where we have a list of projects, and I'm able to do various things like see a document register. I think to just bring up I can do a search on models or drawings, bring up what I have. The thing with Aconex, it goes beyond file and communications, but it tracks transmittals and submittals and RFIs, and we can do shop drawing reviews. A lot of the backbone, the communication about the information is tracked through Aconex. So what that means is if I'm building a model and I make a drawing and I publish it to Aconex, I've published it. I don't want you to edit the drawing. I want you to comment on it, enhance the design based on your comments and your feedback. We want to track decisions. So as a BIM coordinator, I say, okay, there's a decision that impacts the model. And then when we make the change and somebody yells at us, the decision is tracked over here. And it can connect to your mail system and all that good stuff. This is so you mentioned A360. Autodesk has an identity crisis going on. So A360, BIM 360, same thing. They did a rebranding last November. So you'll often see BIM 360 and A360 tied side by side. Their philosophy is A is associated to AutoCAD too much, and AutoCAD is not BIM, therefore rebranded as BIM. So this used to be A360 team, now it's BIM 360 team. We use this to create projects, and when we create projects, one of the things we can do is host our Revit models. So these are actually live central models that exist here in the cloud. The beauty of BIM 360 collaboration for Revit is it allows me to open Revit models not hosted in my network, and we'll talk about that in the presentation, work on them live with people across the world. And I use this NTA Redline as the example. This is a Tel Aviv project being run in Toronto, London, UK, our office in Israel, Tel Aviv, 3 sub-consultants in Israel, and an external entity in Moscow. So it's a beautiful example of a little bit of everything touching a project, whole host of models, ArcStruct, MEP, they're all linked together. You can upload, download, etc., and you're able to actually view the models as well live in this environment here. So just clicking on any one model, the benefit is, and I think somebody mentioned this in the discussion, is non-users, except when you get that doesn't help. But basically, it's supposed to bring up the model and you're able to actually see the model. So of course, when I do tests, I should always go to my tests where I know I've done it before and bring up my test. And you're able to see the model live in the environment, which is why I hate doing live examples that aren't on a video, but there you go. So hopefully you're seeing the model appear there. So as the model is being synced live, as a reviewer, I can actually see it, comment on it, put comments live, and the team would actually get notified that, hey, there's been a comment made on this Revit model via the Revit communicator. Big drawback, Revit and Revit only, so it has unfortunately no connection to anything DWG. So as I mentioned last week, buildings don't float. One of the biggest things to coordinate are how they interact with site and utilities. I'll come back to Bentley in a moment. The other one I wanted to show was BIMTrack, which I believe you guys will be looking at. Algonquin has a test account for BIMTrack. BIMTrack is another one that you track the changes. You track the communications, if you will. So what this is showing here is I've got 26 issues on a model. Again, this is this Tel Aviv model, and I'm able to get a visualization of what the issue is live in the Revit model, and we mitigate the changes, communicate, and post it. I'm able to, if I was in Revit, and again, it's Revit only, and I believe ArchiCAD, or they're working on ArchiCAD, but they have Revit and Navisworks. So in either the Revit or Navisworks application, you use the BIM track add-on, and you can actually go to the location of the clash. So it's really cool. This is a Canadian firm that's grown quite heavily, so it's pretty good stuff. Cloud-based, tracking the issues, most importantly, tracking the resolution and the impact the resolution may have on the project itself. Unify. I'm not sure if either of you are anyone's familiar with Unify, but I will bring up the desktop app. But something that benefits us is, and I don't touch on this one in the presentation, but Unify, it's about cloud-based content management. And content is a huge problem, a huge problem in the industry, because there's so much, I was going to say crap, but potentially good stuff out there. And as BIM coordinators, you're bombarded with, you want me to model, but we don't have the stuff to model. And I hear it all the time, and it's mind-boggling. So even something like wall types. So as an architect, here I'm at Building Code for Alberta and Ontario, and we have libraries put together where I can come in here, I can see all the various wall types properly named, select a family, and insert it into Revit. It'll recognize and again, this is Revit only, so I'll preface that as one of the biggest I would love to click on this and say, what do you want to insert it in? Revit, Vectorworks, EcoSim, ArchiCAD, pick. We're not quite there as an industry yet. So this is a Revit tool that IBI uses, and it's great. I pick my family, I insert it, it pops open my Revit or sees which Revit I have opened already, and it puts the family in my active central model. So that's pretty cool. The other thing which is really awesome about it is it does Google searching. So if I searched, and what's the one I always do? Door. Yeah, right. Okay, let me get out of, let me try that again. Door, right, wall. There we go. I got to do a demo that works, right? So wall, I've got 13 results. But if I do wall, clinic, it puts me down to the 1. So depending on what, and I don't know what we have populated in here yet. I think I'm tied to there we go. Let me get to all the libraries. That's better. So I search chair, I've got 56 results, right? And then if I search chair, exec, not me, office. So you can see how it's very Google-like, that, I don't know, I gotta have a proper search result, obviously. Plastic, let's do chair plastic. And it'll narrow it down to the results it finds. So by doing that, it saves our users having to actually go and find on a Windows server or browsing in the Revit browser, which is not fun, the appropriate family. And this allows us to search by name, by tag, etc. The other thing it does is it lets us quality check. So I can get senior architects to go in here and validate the content, validate the parameter entries. So if I have a wall, is it a fire rated wall, sound rated wall? So it allows the BIM coordinators to interact with the discipline leads to make sure that the content is spot on before we're actually applying it into our projects. And then the dashboard itself lets us see what's been placed by whom, when. Like I can actually do a search on a user, see what they've been putting in the models, and see if they're following the rules that we're trying to govern globally. So it's very Big Brother peering in, but it's all right. The other one that I'll touch quite a bit on in the presentation is ProjectWise. And this is a system that I've used for about a decade and a half now. It's great and it's frustrating all at the same time. It's got both a desktop application as well as a web-based application. And the beauty of it is you can put absolutely anything in here. And applications integrate, so I can do AutoCAD, Civil 3D, MicroStation, etc. Link files to each other, and it's all happy. In the presentation, I'll talk about some of the drawbacks that it has with Revit. But other than that, it's a great system that's out there, and it then ties into what Bentley says is their cloud-based environment that allows me to do a whole host of other items like, and we'll talk a bit about this, synchronizing from the cloud to local servers, and then we can do field data, dashboarding, managing transmittals and submittals. So I'll touch a bit about all of this, but I wanted to show you the gambit of this because in the presentation, I think the biggest takeaway is there's no one right solution, okay? I've opened up the next assignment, and we'll talk about that at the end, and it's about thinking of a collaboration solution. That's what it is. No one right solution. Most likely there's always going to be a hybrid. IBI Group as a whole is a hybrid. We've got 7, 8 systems that I'm showing you here, and we have a couple others that are lingering around out there as well. So the presentation is going to be, the assignment's going to be read a bit of criteria, give me your thoughts on what you think could work. And that's it. I'm not going to assign, like obviously you guys are new to BIM. So the grading criteria for that assignment is not going to be, give me something that works or else you fail. It's going to be, think about what you think could work. And imagine I'm your project manager and you're bringing to me a solution for some project criteria. And it'll be, and we'll go through some of that criteria after, but it's going to be, just imagine, you know, you've got a bunch of users, a bunch of products. How do I share this stuff? And then you come and say, here's something to think about. In the real world, you'll probably never get it right the first time. I can't even tell you how many times I've had the joy of standing something online, finding out that it actually doesn't work. I get yelled at. You know, you have project managers saying, oh my God, you're wasting everything, scope, schedule, budget, and all that good stuff. So that'll be the assignment. But what we'll do is we'll go through the presentation now. Are there any questions or comments before I go through the slides?
No.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir.
Oh, is that Amit?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah. What's your question?
Are these any of the sites free so we can use it?
We'll touch on that in the presentation, but most let me see. I want to say no. The BIM track is there. There is an Algonquin account that was created, but that depends. I don't know. I don't think you've reached that point in your class yet, right?
Okay.
But all of these other ones. Box, you can, I think there's the free account that you guys can create, but for the sake of the assignments, there's no need, right? It's just going to be, you know, based on the material, and there might be a bit of like poking around online to come up with what potentially could or couldn't work. And hopefully I leave you enough in the dialogue just to, you know, I'll hopefully touch upon what, you know, some of the obvious things that just can't happen. Right?
Oh, okay.
Cool. And then if not, you guys remember, always feel free to throw questions at me. Okay. So the material itself, let's go through that. So keep in mind the background of all those sites I just showed and everything, because collaboration is dynamic, okay? So the first thing when we talk about collaboration, and I discovered this when I started my job at IBI Group, collaboration is the most convoluted word imaginable. Everybody wants to collaborate. So I said the first thing in the world of BIM is to distinguish the difference between BIM and IT. Okay, and this is what I present is that, you know, we're not about, you know, we're not BIM coordinators who are going to go and set up Skype and Slack and Communicator. Those are internal chatting systems. Slack is a little more intriguing, but often, you know, we get convoluted with Brent. I get Brent, our teams have to talk. Should I use Slack? And I'll say, yeah, you can use whatever your teams have to talk. Use the phone, just talk, right? So a lot of that gets convoluted. I'll get asked, Brent, what do you recommend for, you know, what video cameras should we put in our conference rooms? I'll just say, go talk to IT guys, because I'll give you very expensive responses you might not like. Oftentimes the IT infrastructure comes up all the time. right? Brent, should we get a backup internet service provider? And I'll say, sure, that wouldn't hurt. But items like these, they don't benefit on giving advice on the best solution to share Revit, share Civil 3D, yet we're inherently connected. And that's how that's the feedback I give. I'll tell our project managers, our office leads, yes, you need internet, the faster the better. Yes, you need a network, the faster the better. The more powerful computers, the better. And there's no, I would never say lesser is better. Yes, more powerful equals good. So go off, budget it, do what you have to do. There are minimum requirements, so stuff like ProjectWise and BIM 360 Team. I can't remember, like the minimum requirements are all within the established norm of the industry, right? So whatever my home internet is, if I had a Revit license, I'd be fine. If my syncing is a little slower than when I'm in the office, I'd be fine. We would just move on with life. So that's the message for this. And when you get your jobs, don't get convoluted. It is about this. We're collaborating on the creation and management of content for the sake of some type of delivery and some type of preservation for reuse. And I say that as generically as I can say it, because it's not just the creation of a model, but it's a creation of that information and the purpose of the information. And then there's the advancement of the information. There is mitigating change to that information. There's delivering it to a contractor, an owner, delivering it at the end of design, delivering at the end of construction. And then IBI does a lot of work at actually managing it during operations as well. So depending on what the nature of your involvement on the project is, this changes. But it's funny, I've made this slide on the London Olympics in 2006, and I'm still using it in 2017, because it is a very powerful slide in my opinion. That's what we're trying to do. So when I say, let's collaborate, and then I'll say, now let's get ready to fail, and you're going to fail because you don't answer these questions. What's being shared? Where? Who's going to lead it? And how do we make it happen? And it's amazing. And I'll tell you, I kid you not, when I look at these 4 questions, and then, yeah, I've been in this for a very long time, I struggle with why don't you just answer? Just answer the questions. And it is funny that first question tends to be where we always fail. And I'll tell you, even when I'm involved early, what are we sharing? Oh, we're just sharing a little bit of AutoCAD files. That's all. Revit is only being done in this one office. I say, okay, that sounds pretty easy. And then I get the frantic call a month later. They're sharing the Revit model with another office and an external entity can't do. And I step back and I say, oh my goodness, you changed your answers. So not only did you not tell me what's being shared, you either didn't tell me deliberately, or when it changed, you just assumed your answers didn't matter. It's just mind-boggling. So, often we have to think about, is it office to office or is it office to cloud? And that influences how it can be shared. Some stuff is live shared. Some stuff is better for single locations. And that's a big thing in the assignment. So some of those trigger points, and I'll talk about that as we get in. Are we sharing a Revit model? Are we sharing a SmartPlant 3D database? Now, some of these tools you may or may not know, and that's where we might have to have additional dialogue, as you're looking through the assignments. But some of those triggers, does it have a database? Is it just files? Is it just DWGs? Will the project have a little bit of everything? Those are the types of questions. If you remember last week during the software presentation, I distinguished between building, civil, and plant. Sharing civil is usually easier because there's usually DWGs or DGNs. But Civil 3D has those data shortcuts that we have to remember. And remember, I described that as, you have a DWG, I have a DWG. I make surface 1. I don't want you making surface 1. I want you to use my definition of surface 1. Therefore, it goes to this data shortcut, So we sync it, and then you pull down the definition. Small syncing, but it's still synchronized data. In the plant world, I lay a pipeline 1. Well, that's your pipeline too. I don't want you to have pipeline 1 that's different from my pipeline. And then you guys are probably more comfortable in the building world. We're syncing to this common big bucket of Revit. And I keep describing it as that because when it's a big bucket, we're all hitting it. And we'll talk about some of the differences there. The locations. This is the greatest thing I stress is, you one office or are you 10 offices? And if you're 10 offices, are you in the one entity, so a wide area network, or are you outside, IBI and somebody else? That's always the big question. And then even when it's inside our firm, the one firm, is it just North America? Is it North America and India and the United Arab Emirates? Is there Australia? And then are there issues? So in my experience, I can say when you share live with India and the UAE, there's a struggle because the pipeline in and out of those countries have high latency. If I was sharing just inside India, beautiful. If I add an office in North America, that'll take a lot of thought about that. So once you've answered 1 and 2, enter us, project BIM lead, or whatever semantic you use, BIM coordinator, BIM manager, IT manager, whatever it is, interface manager, digital design, I don't care the name. Somebody's accountable to lead it. And what I say to the project manager is, if you don't name the lead, you're accountable on top of all the other project management things you do. Then they go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, we'll have a lead. Somebody has to lead it. And then, of course, if you're leading it, then we have an action plan. Are there costs? That was a great question. I mean, if I'm using collaboration for Revit, does it cost any money? And if it does, who pays? How do we pay? Is it enterprise? Is it project? Are we feeding it to the client? Do we have licenses? All that good stuff. Do I have to deploy something? Is it cloud-based? Is there an installation to the computer? Answer all these questions. What do I have to train, etc. So all those come in. The other piece of collaboration that's so inherently important for me is WIP, shared, published. And I think I mentioned this in week 1, and I think I'm going to keep mentioning this just until the end of this term. So if you get sick of it, you maybe won't hear it again next term, but this is so important. I am sharing my Revit WIP model. It's very different than me sharing a Revit model that's complete and representative of my published content. So the difference there, WIP, all of us on this call, we're all live editing the content. We're all authoring the BIM. And this doesn't matter whether it's building, civil, or plant. We're all actively designing and actively creating content, okay? So in the Revit vernacular, we're all syncing to the same central in the Revit world. Shared is easier, right? It's a sort of static representation of a certain point in time. And I say sort of because using the Revit Navigator, Revit Navisworks, or using Bentley's EcoSim Navigator, you can basically live link. So I can link Revit into Navisworks. I can link EcoSim into Navigator. So you're kind of getting more dynamic updates of the current state of design, but really it's in the shared world. We're not authoring the content, we're authoring something about the content. So I'm looking at the model, I'm saying, you know, that door looks like it's in the wrong spot, allow me to comment, let's mitigate the comment, come to a resolution, and away we go. When I started one of my first architectural projects, I had a piping designer come to me and say, my pipes are the most important. You just put a pretty shell around the building. So if I say the pipe goes here, you're going to move your door. I looked at him and I said, well, no, this is a fire exit. You can't put your pipe there. And it was that dialogue, and we had it in the digital, and we came to a resolution, and it was documented, and away we go. So the shared is about mitigation or information about what's being authored. Published is the static representation. So that ACONNEX project, or ACONNEX system I showed you, we have a deliverable. From my model, I generate PDFs of sheets, of drawings. The model itself might be a static snapshot jammed as part of the deliverable, and there may be specifications, basis of design documents. If we get into construction, there could be shop drawings, RFIs, add-ons to change orders, etc. But all of it is a static locked in time representation. This is published for the purpose of this delivery. Once it's published, it can then be reviewed, commented on, delivered to authorities, whatever. Very important. In the UK, so as you guys saw with the BIM execution plan comparison, there's always, UK does have unique rules because of their British Standard 1192. One of them is a strict adherence to their file naming and their purposes. So this S0, meaning work in progress. You can see the WIP shared published is it's ingrained. This was the foundation of British Standard 1192. When it was on the London Olympics, it was called the Avanti, the proposed Avanti standard, and this is what came out of it, the WIP shared publish, and it's a beautiful thing. So this diagram just shows, you know, there is that delineation of that stage where, you know, this client, this red of the client area is what I wanted to show you. So client is a loose term in my opinion. So it can be the client, really another word could be the stakeholder. Somebody who has a vested interest in the information that you've authored for a purpose. So client isn't just that end game, the person who wrote the EIR or the person who gave you answers to the questions in the EIR. The client could be, I'm designing a house, I know who my homeowner is, but I've got to give the designs to the municipality for a building permit. I've got to give the designs maybe to the local association so they approve, like in City of Toronto, they got to approve how it looks at the streetscape, maybe the heritage, maybe the Parks Department. One time I was designing a water treatment plant in the middle, a water treatment pump station in the middle of the golf course. So the golf course was a client just to make sure they approved of the exterior appearance. So there could be multiple stakeholders at various stages who are sharing, who are reviewing shared or published content. So that's what they're showing. And then in PAS 1192, I like this workflow diagram because it kind of, it's rather complicated, if you will, but kind of shows that beginning where you've got the employer's information requirement. You start the process of work in progress with a whole bunch of professional design task teams. Content gets approved for sharing, authorized for published, verified, and then archived for future use. And it might go out to specialists, and there's a whole bunch of cycles. And the beauty of this, CapEx means capacity expansion. The beauty of this is it's a continual cycle of advancement of information. And I can't remember if it was week 1 or 2 when I showed that whole PAS document where the UK is working heavily under the concept that, you know, my information does not die because I may just be the designer. And that's something to think about in this whole realm of collaboration, is there's more to it than just, I am the architect making my design. Yes, I am. And when we get to week 8, 9, and 10, we're going to talk about why I, the architect, am afraid of this stuff, the legal, the liability, the stuff that I fear partially rightfully and very partially wrongfully, and what the barriers are to achieve this. But in the world of BIM collaboration, it's about sharing and advancement and the data that never dies. It must continue onward. So when we're BIM coordinators, so why are we collaborating? What are we sharing? And when is it being shared? And I think when is probably the biggest. Why and what are probably the two that we talk about the most. You know, why are you sharing? Because I have 2 entities that are working on a Revit model for a building. We're the architect and structural, the other entity is MEP. Pretty easy. What are you sharing? Our Revit model, and there's going to be some civil somewhere, and we tend to forget about that. So we'll say, okay, don't forget civil. We try to bring you all together. Then all of a sudden, when? So, oh, what do you mean? And everybody stops that. So there's a temporal nature to this, and that has to do with the type of project. So in the assignment, I have 3 projects that I list. One being a design bid build. Traditional, you design, your work ends, it goes out for bid, and then it goes to a builder contractor. A design build, where we're together for the duration. And then a P3, public-private partnership, where we're all in there, owner, contractor, and designer, all working together through the life cycle. So from the collaboration perspective, it won't affect your solution other than being aware that the when is very critical to the type of project. And we will talk about project types later on. Plan the work. If there's no BIM lead, we fail. And I love saying that, and I say that so boldly to project managers, to leaders within my firm, and to leaders in other firms. If you're not leading it, we're just setting ourselves up for failure, right? Where is the information being authored versus consumed? Big point. Creation is one thing, that's your WIP. Consumption, shared and published, okay? WIP is the most difficult. Sharing and publishing, that's pretty easy. You all know Dropbox. I can dump anything on Dropbox and say this represents my current state today. Anybody can grab it. Take that, put it into more secure and more intellectual systems. It's really the same concept. Okay, that's cool. I don't know why that shifted over. Who decides where the work is being authored? So once you get who's authoring and who's consuming, then you got to be bold as a BIM coordinator. And some of the things I'll bring up is, I've heard people say, I'm just used to using my Revit where I open the model on my server. You're now forcing me to use a cloud environment. And I'll say, yes. And then I get yelled at. And then I'll say, what's the problem? And then they say, well, it's slower. Okay. Cloud versus my own computer. Yeah, cloud might be slower. Then they'll say, why are you doing this? Then I'll say, because somebody decided, and this is a true case, somebody decided that architectural, structural, and mechanical are being done inside the office, but electrical is going to be one person in our office, one person in office number 2, and one person in an external entity. So for this one discipline, somebody made the decision that the central model is going to be split between 3 locations, including an external. And I look at them and I say, so what do you want? You either don't share it that way, or you share it that way, and here are your possible solutions that involve the cloud. So that's the boldness that we have to do sometimes. And it goes into how's the project being split. And you see that on major projects where, you know, you can look at even high-rise buildings. And I've seen, let's split it up core and shell. Let's split it up by floors. Oftentimes we have projects with multiple towers and a podium. So they split tower 1, tower 2, but then the first 4 or 5 floors will be the overall podium of the entire site. So when there is that thinking, it takes what's often the big bucket of Revit or the monster models that are way too big, and it puts them into controllable pieces that can then be split amongst various offices or entities. So right away when I hear the flag of, we've got one big and awesome model, we're all going to share it globally. And I'll say, can we talk about that, please? Civil 3D data shortcuts. I'm going to keep stressing that because I think you guys are the most familiar with Revit. So I've seen this with the BIM coordinators in IBI as well. I mentioned it's Civil 3D data shortcuts, or DSPs for short, and I get the blank look. And I keep saying to them, you guys don't have to be Civil 3D experts. Recognize the fact that there's this thing that civil modelers share, and we have to know how to do that. And I've been training my BIM coordinators to understand what options we have to do that. Plan it at the front, be proactive, not reacting through the project, and understand that anything we do from a BIM collaboration perspective, and I mean anything, that differs from go to Windows Explorer and open, will cause, this is different, this, I don't like it, it's going to make risk, it might make me slower, I'm less efficient, burning project budget, I can think of all the wonderful excuses. All good. Because at the end of the day, I'll just say, if you don't want to share, hire enough people, put them all in the seats where we don't fit in this building anyway, but hire them all and we'll all work right here off of the local server. And then you get quick silence. So you'll hear me talk often about LAN, WAN, and cloud. So this came out of the the Institute for BIM in Canada's BIM practice manual, and I love it. I thought it was really good. So if you think, go back 30 years, and my father's a practicing architect. So, you know, I was there when he bought, I think it was a 086 and then the 286 computers, and it was AutoCAD 4, I think. So pretty cool, and especially compared to where we are today. And I remember connecting a LAN and local network in the house, and he was baffled. You know, it was all new stuff. Now this is the comfortable norm, right? If it's on an IBI, it's the J drive. If it's on the J drive, everybody's happy. It's the familiar. You go to Windows Explorer, you have your map drive, you have a project number, and you're good. So that's where we are today. Corporations, so if you're in a multi-office firm, you're on the WAN. So just a bunch of LANs connected together, the wide area network. And the struggle here is your connection speeds between offices. So IBI has some offices where we actually have fiber connections between offices or fiber connections to a data center. So this is the ideal thing. So for us in Toronto, if we want to do network-based work, our main office and our airport offices are connected via a data center. So it's seamless. I go to either office. It's all the same shared drives, and we can share quite easily. But if I'm sharing with India, our Delhi office, if I'm sharing with our UK offices, it's a greater challenge. So I don't say to somebody, open up a Revit model that's in the Toronto server while you're sitting down in San Diego or while you're sitting in Hyderabad. So in India. So that's something to keep in mind. And oftentimes as a BIM lead, this isn't anything we have to battle, because the second we get to office, the slowness is just apparent. And you know, it's slow with Revit, even with Civil 3D, even with just simple AutoCAD and MicroStation. You have XREFs or linked files. The loading of those, the regeneration, loading of the associated resources, it just takes forever. And then cloud, that's where the bulk of the effort is happening in something like Microsoft Azure or the Amazon cloud. That's where the computing power is, and you're basically using a terminal to access the information hosted on the cloud. So a lot of those examples I showed, BIMTrack, BIM 360 Cloud, Aconex, ProjectWise, they're all up in the cloud. Some of them use transferring to bring information local, so it locally caches it to your computer, so you work locally, sync back up to the cloud. Others, you're inputting information directly to the cloud, and there's pluses and minuses for both. So an image I captured off of LinkedIn at one point, I thought it was pretty good, as it does the depiction. On cloud, it costs less, so immediately when you're dealing with the finance side of your businesses, they see that and say, wow, that's cheaper. But then they don't account for all of the underwater stuff there, right? The cloud computing, so like ProjectWise, it could get up to 1,000 a user, depending on how you distribute licenses. BIM 360 Team, I think, is 800 a user. So it gets costly. And then you say, well, why would we do that? And you say, well, there's other solutions that are on-premise, like a Revit server, where it's 5,000 for a server box, and then there's maintenance, yearly maintenance on the server box. There's yearly licensing on the Windows server or the operating system. Then there's the IT labor cost to just manage the box. And, you know, once you start adding all that stuff up, you say, oh, okay, there's something to think about. And I'll argue that anything cloud is scalable to anything global, whereas on-premise is usually tied to the premise. So, IBI group, don't get scared by what I'm about to show you, but I do bring it up piece by piece. So I use this diagram internally. It's kind of cool. So I think it's cool. You can tell me yes or no. We got a lot of servers. So IBI, we've got 68 offices globally. Each office has their own J drive. That's where we do our project work, except for a couple offices that are fiber connected. Great. So what happens? We do our work inside one office, we're good. If we have multiple offices, we engage forms of copying. That would be the simplest way. So that's where, as a BIM coordinator, I say, okay, we're confined. I know that Office 1 and Office 2 are going to work together. Office 1 is working on X, Office 2 is working on Y. So we can just copy back and forth. Office 2 will never work on X, Office 1 will never work on Y. So there's clear delineation of the project. That's why that slide earlier. What are we sharing? How are we sharing it? If somebody can promise explicitly that the models will be separated and you're basically working in a LAN environment and just copying back and forth for reference purposes, beautiful. But I will always say beware, because I'm not going to say people lie, but in the panic of, oh my God, I need 5 people to finish this project, all of a sudden now what was one office suddenly becomes 10 offices and everybody's complaining that it's slow. And that's what I've described. So some offices, instead of by copying, we've merged pieces together. So that's your data connectivity. Very expensive. So we've done some pricing in IBI where we'll say, what's our nexus? So the 2 Toronto offices, 50% of the time they were sharing projects. We've got offices like our Southfield and Raleigh, Edmonton and Calgary, London and Brighton, Delhi and the other one, Hyderabad. They work together very often, so there's merit to saying, can we fuse these offices together? When that doesn't happen, so we'll leave that on the side. Then we go to other systems and say, okay, how about Revit? We're going to share Revit across offices. Again, we have the single J drive, Revit server, or C4R. So Revit server is, I call it an old solution. So it is discontinued from advancements on the Autodesk world, but basically it is, and I'll show a slide later, it allows us to sync to a Revit model that's hosted in one office and accessed in other offices. And it uses local caching and acceleration to say, let me take what you have, copy it to my office, I'll access it from my office, and then the Revit server fuses all the changes together. C4R is pretty much the same thing, collaboration for Revit, yet it does it up in the BIM 360 cloud. The critical thing with Revit, and this is something that is unique, I think Revit and ArchiCAD, where there's common access central models is, if I move a wall and take ownership, you need to instantly be told that I have ownership of the wall. And that's how we test these systems. So Revit server C4R, what basically we'll do is in 2 different locations, we'll count to 3, and one of us try to move the same wall. One of us will move it, one of us has to be told you can't move it. If you both can move the same component, BIM collaboration fails. Okay, and that's the trick we do to test this. And that's when we're accessing from multiple locations where it's being locally cached. Okay, and that's the critical thing. Revit is a big bucket that we're all accessing. So the local caching is not only the model itself, but the permissions on who's changing those elements at any one moment. So if all 8 of us did this with a Revit model and I won, I would move the wall, you would all be told you can't move the wall, it's owned by Brent. Then you put a request, hey Brent, can I move the wall? And we have the proper dialogue. If all 8 of us move the wall, and all 8 of us moved it to 8 different locations, and then all 8 of us pressed the sync button, slowly each one of us would sync, and the last completed sync would be the one that wins, and that's just a horrible situation. Then ProjectWise, so IBI, we threw up ProjectWise. There's a desktop version and just the web version. The desktop lets us edit and author BIM files, so Civil 3D, Revit, MicroStation, all the Bentley stuff. The web version lets you view. Revit allows us to do full access to all the, ProjectWise lets us do full access to all of the non-Revit files. And it also provides us a mechanism to share Revit, but I'll tell you as I have the Revit limitations. We use our SharePoint site, which I showed there, and that's for our non-CAD BIM stuff. And then we have the whole bunch of contract admin. I showed Aconex as an example, but we have all these other items where we do RFIs and change orders, and we track submittals and transmittals. And when I came to IBI, there was too much disconnection. So as a BIM lead, thinking about lifecycle data management, thinking all this stuff has to tie together. All of it in the IBI world has access to what we call our iDrive, which is a replicated set of standards. So that's a very important piece. Regardless of everything in the purple, where we're sharing our project stuff, our technical standards, if you will. So that would be Revit templates, CTB files, Civil 3D styles, all the MicroStation data sets. Everything that needs to be common has to be accessible. So the example there is, if we all start a Revit model and we all say file new, we're all going to be seeing the same templates. And you'll be surprised, depending on the firms you go to, and I found disconnects when I came here, some offices do their own thing. And then when you try to share on a BIM file, you're sharing insanity, really. And then we have community sites internally, and that's our general, like our legal, our HR, and all of that. Then I came in and I said, well, let's look at syncing from the cloud to our J drives. And that allowed me to introduce some interesting pieces. So this is the ProjectWise sync service. It says you can go up into ProjectWise, work on AutoCAD, Civil 3D, and everything of that nature. But what if I want to do Revit on my J drive? So sync service says, let me synchronize the stuff that's happening in ProjectWise down to your servers. So your Revit models can have live DWG references of those that are up in the cloud. And then vice versa. We sync that Revit model up into ProjectWise so that the AutoCAD folk will have something to reference or refer back to. So that was an interesting thing. It's only a couple of years old now, but conceptually, it's not only just the copying amongst the green boxes, which is within a network, but I can now use a cloud-based synchronization service to sync from a network to the cloud and from the cloud back down to networks. So it opens up the possibility. So if you said to me, damn it, Brent, I'm not paying for this cloud nonsense. All I'm working on is this small piece of the project in my comfortable realm of my land. I'll say, all right, let's synchronize down and synchronize up. The overall project is not burdened by a limitation of any one entity. And then sometimes as a BIM coordinator, you have to say, what other mechanisms do I need to do in order to copy to and from cloud-based environments, either one environment to another environment, etc. So that's what I'm trying to show here, is that, you know, in our world, and that pink is just further environments for shared and published. In our world, I would be very impressed if you had any one solution for WIP shared and published on a project, okay? And we'll go on and then we'll come back because I know it'll cause a lot of questions. This is what we want. And I can't remember where I snagged that image from. But one day, I can see us getting there. And even though I just showed you this, and I know this is my world, this is pretty clean compared to what I've seen in the past and compared to what I found when I came here. It's not quite this yet, but this is what we want, where you say, you know, and places like Autodesk BIM 360, this is what they're trying to get to. You know, they do aspire to that. So too does Bentley, ArchiCAD, well, Nementschek with their acquisition of ArchiCAD and Xerophis and all of these other applications, and are already having Vectorworks. The problem in the industry is not everybody is fully connected with the Open BIM platform. So that's your IFC, BCS, MVDs, everything by Building Smart. Not everything feeds smoothly, and we still have barriers of just simple sharing. Simple, you need stuff, I'm making stuff, let's share and bring it together. But that is the goal we want to get to. So some of the barriers have to do with how we make our teams. So again, I think day one, I said, what are you BIMing and why are you BIMing it? Great questions. This here, so what are you sharing? How are you going to share it? With whom and when? So the concept of a virtual team. So let's think about this for a moment. So in the world of BIM, you're the project BIM lead. You're going to have an influence on all of the project disciplines, okay? I've had struggles with this dialogue internally. Not that it's a new role, but the concept of funding a role and giving it empowerment and, you know, giving the message that, hey, Mr. Architect and various Mr. and Mrs. Engineers, you're not 100% in charge. Neither are you, Mr. and Mrs. Project Manager. Okay. And in fact, just prior to here, I had a call on the very subject with a whole bunch of project managers about who defines how to what level we need to BIM. And it was an interesting dialogue with people that really didn't understand. So that's something where there's the boldness of this role. But when we put these teams together, the difference between a centralized database and what we call federated. Centralized is we're all working together, feeding a big bucket. Now, this could be Revit, and this could be Smart Plant 3D, or any plant project. So take note of that for your assignments. Revit, plant products are very similar in this manner. If I'm in one office, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It works beautifully. It sits on your server, and you're awesome. If I'm not in one office, this is what we get. And just for the sake of time, I'll just do that. You get different access speeds depending on your connectivity. And, you know, when you look at this, the mechanical engineer is pretty happy. That poor project manager and structural engineer are probably saying, BIM is horrible, BIM doesn't work, it costs too much money, I'm more efficient in 2D. All of the stuff, like you just imagine the stuff that's said. And, you know, and when I go in there and I listen to this, and I find out why are we saying this? And then I go see somebody press sync to central and they just sit there. And I say, well, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. Whereas other firms are like, oh, I'm all on board on Revit and Revit is God's gift to everything. Well, the mechanical engineer would say that. So keep that in mind. And oftentimes you'll be on a project where the EIR, so remember the importance of the EIR, the client says, deliver me a Revit model. Well, that just tied your hands to your building software. It will be Revit. You're delivering a Revit model. From a collaboration perspective now, you've got one intriguing problem to solve. It's how do you split the model? So how do you set it up? How do you share it? And then we'll get into BIM uses and workflows next week, because once you're confined to a software, then that'll impact what you can actually do with it as well. But just focusing on collaboration. If the client says Revit, or I've been on projects where the client has said Smart Plant 3D, and I'm using that as an example. I think I have that in one of the project examples on the assignment. Smart Plant 3D is a really awesome tool. And I've done work on it. It's really good. But it is one big monster database that you put in one office. It's not cloud compatible unless they've advanced it, but it's in an office. So keep that in mind. Federated is a different story. So from the federated perspective, instead of being a big bucket, and I keep saying that, the bucket of Revit, the bucket of Smart Plant 3D, I have my piece to the puzzle, and my piece forms a whole puzzle. And because we're sharing puzzle pieces, I'm not dependent on my connectivity between offices. We're just sharing our puzzle pieces. Now, the mechanism of sharing is not, it's not email. It could be, that would be really bad. It's usually one of these systems. ProjectWise is a great example. Everything can sit up in ProjectWise. I access my file, and I'm just linking to your stuff. Okay? So when you update, I get the update. If you don't update, I'm working on my own. Whereas in the centralized database, if you're syncing and I'm syncing and I'm waiting for you to sync and you have to release content, you've locked one of my work sets, you've borrowed an element that's supposed to be my element and I can't touch it, and you go for a coffee, all that stuff comes into play. Now, I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but delineating which one to do and when, That's the fun challenge of being a BIM coordinator. So that comes into play. Then there's cost. So in IBI, I pulled together what I called collaboration menus, just to get the dialogue going. And I said to them, think about what you're BIMing, why you're BIMing it, what you're sharing, and with whom. So I started to pull together, for non-CAD information, here are some options. Quick availability, focusing a lot on the network. Is it internal or does it allow for external? Because that often delineates. Now, this was an old one. Our SharePoint now is up in the cloud. Some have cost, some don't. So often it's who has to connect and what is the cost. Then I keep stressing them for CAD and BIM, it's a different dialogue. And then I say, put Revit aside. So from right now, just CAD and BIM, what we usually do is our internal network or ProjectWise. And I'll show you ProjectWise in a bit. DT is design technology in my world. But what I'm showing here is that, we do have various solutions. One costs, one doesn't. One allows for global scalability, one doesn't. So it's always the dialogue of what's the nature of the project. And when we're faced with, I don't know if we can do 1,000 a user, and we'll say per year. We'll say, that's okay. Get all your users in one office. Well, we can't do that. That'll cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's your balance right there. Expand your office, make mass hires, put everybody under one roof, set up a project office, whatever the answer is. Usually that's not the case. Therefore, we want to tap global expertise. And then I mentioned this sync service. So we could use the cloud as a synchronizing mechanism between servers of various entities. It's a very powerful thing to keep in mind. The other thing, Civil 3D. Always remember Civil 3D, data shortcut projects, ProjectWise is an empowering mechanism. BIM 360, I've given Autodesk a piece of my mind saying, how can you give us collaboration for Revit and do something awesome for Revit and not have the same degree of awesomeness for Civil 3D? Response, we're working on it. Okay, so it should be coming. On the plant side, Autodesk just opened up their Plant 3D cloud offering. So all of a sudden, if it's a Plant 3D project, I can use BIM 360 Team as the collaborating mechanism. So very exciting there, and that's basically brand new in the last month. Then there's the Revit, and the Revit side, it's like you pull your hair out because Revit is awesome and Revit is equally challenging. So a couple things that we think about here, C4R is the newest and I love it. It still scares a bit of people, but that's okay. C4R is my preferred thing for Revit as it stands today. It's in the cloud. It does work the best. ProjectWise, we'll talk about its limitations in a bit. Revit Server is legacy. It does work. You can see for us, we have it in a handful of projects, but it is that local, drop money for a server, manage the server. It works fine as long as the wide area network is up to par. The wider you go, you could have challenges. So this is kind of what I've done, an approach I've taken to bring to the surface possibilities. So then, of course, I'll get, well, that's great, Brent. So what do all these things mean, right? So local server, as I said, it is the most common. I think the biggest challenge, and I found this in IBI, folder structure. Well, everybody has different folder structures. We're trying to reconcile ours between North America and the UK as we speak. Folder structures are in the BIM world. I'll say they're somewhat irrelevant because they can be anything. For us, it's about clarity of data and consistency. That's the message that I give. So when I brought up this slide, I always say, look, we got two things. Let's just consolidate and move forward. So when you get to wherever you end up working, wherever you're performing this function, always ask the question though, what is the nature of the server's IT? And always be clear with that. The servers are owned by IT. So I came in, I said, what the heck is the J drive? tell me how this works. And I discovered, as you can see here in IBI, each region has their own J drive. So that helped me to understand, okay, each office has a local server. And then I discovered which ones are connected by fiber connectivity, and there's only a handful. So right away, I know if I have multiple offices working on projects, it better be divided properly, or we better jump to something else. Oh, that's this next slide, sorry. So common J drive, so common servers is one thing. WAN acceleration, this is something that is brought up a lot, and I always want to stress, this really is not a BIM thing, okay? I've pushed it to IT, because at the end of the day, IT owns your servers. IT owns your internet and office-to-office connectivity. IT can own WAN acceleration. And what WAN acceleration is, you bring in a vendor, they install some hardware, and basically, if you've heard of Panzura or Riverbed, these are two examples that we've used. It basically connects to the wide area network and accelerates the exchange of the data packets. It uses special proprietary compression and decompression, blah, blah, blah. It all sounds good, right? The gist is, from the BIM perspective, okay, so you're saying it'll make it faster to go from office to office. Great, go talk to my IT, see if you can do that, price it, let's see if it's feasible. Oftentimes we find that there is a heavy cost to some of these, or else obviously we would do it on every single office, right? So the cost has to be mitigated. I put it in here because it does come up, hey, just put in a steel head. And when I hear that a lot, but there's ramifications to that, and it's heavily connected to your IT. SharePoint, I showed you our example here. I think the biggest thing to stress with SharePoint, it's not a live CAD BIM authoring solution. So in the example I pulled up, I showed that I did have Revit files in my SharePoint, if I can find where that was, right? I did have Revit files here, and I do that purposefully. This is to share. I want to share a family. I want to dump a model in, but I'm not going, there's no live syncing or anything of that nature. It's really a non-CAD BIM environment, shared, published, it could be used for, really about connecting teams, more of a social environment for your project team, if you will. Project-wise, okay, this I can talk about for weeks, so we're going to do it in about 2 minutes. That's the goal here. If you've never used ProjectWise, I'll just tell you that it is a very robust and quite awesome tool. Okay, that's how I describe it. Strictly follow prescribed workflows. And the reason for that is ProjectWise has what they call integrated and non-integrated. So an integrated application is something like AutoCAD, Civil 3D, MicroStation. And what happens is when I open AutoCAD and I say attach an XREF, it'll path into ProjectWise, which is great because if all 8 of us were working on a project, you have your DWGs in ProjectWise, I have mine, I just XREF all of yours, you update it, I update it. You do checkout, check-in, all of that good stuff, it locks your files. So strictly follow the workflows. How does it fail? I have my file and I reference it from my C drive. When you open up my file, you don't see my reference because you don't see my C drive. Simple things like that, people freak out. So these are the base functions. And notice some of the differences from that of Revit, right? And the biggest one is this check-in, check-out. That's what it does. So Revit does workset borrow, element borrowing, and workset locking. Any file-based or federated, right? So remember central versus federated. So I have a bunch of DWGs jammed into ProjectWise. I'm going to check it out and open. I'm going to open a file and lock it. You cannot edit what I'm editing. That would be the same for SharePoint. That would be the same for Aconex. A lot of these systems have controlled access. Therefore, you can version, audit trail, see the history, who did what, etc. So that's all good stuff. And all of these systems I showed on the web all have mobile access. It's got all the thing with ProjectWise is it brings these specialty functions different from that of SharePoint and everything else. So it can integrate with all these CAD applications. Title block integration. You can update a database and push values to AutoCAD or MicroStation to update all your title blocks, or now to Revit parameters as well. So there's a lot of power with that. server-side PDF generation. So I can grab 100 DWGs, right-click print, and it does it off on the server. It doesn't hog my machine. With Revit, on the other hand, though, it's a challenge, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I'm just going to skip this one here. This is ProjectWise. So essentially, it's a makeup. It's essentially a bunch of servers that do stuff. Okay. So here I am as a user. I'm accessing through a local cache what exists up in the cloud. So the local cache means if I'm working on a DWG and a bunch of references, or a Revit file with a bunch of links, or a MicroStation file with a bunch of DGN references, it copies it all locally and lets me view it and interact with what I've checked out. When I update, it exchanges only the changes. So that's a very powerful thing. It has Delta file transfer. So it only sends back to the cloud the bits and bytes that I've changed. So that's cool. And then if I was here in my office and you were here in your in the school or in your homes, you're accessing the same content as I am via the internet, and we're all good. So that's ProjectWise. The problem with Revit, it's a weak Revit solution because of the check-in, check-out. So, and I loved how Autodesk and Bentley explained it to me. ProjectWise does not do what they call interweaving. And I thought, you guys making words up, but it's true when they explained it. In the ProjectWise world, when I sync to Central, it locks the file, processes my sync, and checks the file back in. So check out, lock, sync, check back in. The break is while I'm doing that, you're all stopped. You all must pause. And that's the break of how ProjectWise works with Revit. So if it's one or two people, or I'm doing my model, you're doing your model, and we're not really sharing a central model, it works really good. And we've had successes with it on smaller types of projects. The large projects with large models that might take a while to sync, or if I'm workset locking or element borrowing and constantly pausing the model, it's where it breaks. Now, C4R, or just syncing to your server or Revit server, it uses this interweave function. So from the Revit perspective, you have this central model, you have your local copy of the central model, you have your personal copy of your active model. And if you follow the trail, it has those three pieces. One is in your documents, one is in a buried encrypt, and one is at the central location. So in the non-ProjectWise world, I do my change, you do your change. Revit is interweaving the bits and bytes of the communication. So essentially, I lock the door, it's immediately locked to you because it's interweaved to the change. ProjectWise doesn't do that, so I lock the door, it's actually locking Central, and then processing that change to get it to you. So that's a long description on the fact that, yeah, Bentley has heard, and they're changing it. So what Bentley's saying now, you know what, we lose. We've lost the battle. Our central model hosting is pretty good for small. And that's the point when you look at this assignment. If I'm saying it's a couple of users, you have an option here for Revit Centrals. If it's a major project with multiple users, nah, you're not going to put the central model in ProjectWise. But what Bentley has said was, you might publish. So shared and publish. So they're enhancing their integration with Revit 16, 17, and 18 now to say, you know what, put your Revit model wherever you want. Server, server, C4R, Revit server, don't care. Hit publish and put your stuff into ProjectWise and use ProjectWise for the stuff it's really good at instead of the stuff that we're struggling. So these are some of the items they're working on: e-transmitting, backing up, auto sheet publishing into ProjectWise. So they're trying to provide an engine to help the features of Revit that we may or may not struggle with. So in the ProjectWise world, it's cloud-based. It lets us do a whole bunch of things, including integration with our file systems, and that's what IBI has developed. We also have our file system where we can sync to our Revit servers where we might have files, and then it gives us that cloud-based dashboard where we can do other things with. And we do some copying. Even in this solution, it's a hybrid. And I'm going to keep using that term. We're getting towards the end of this presentation. So it's think of everything that we're talking about. Most likely you're going to end up with a hybrid solution. Bentley's concept is, look, you're going to have your Revit, your ProjectWise, your server. We want you to push stuff up to the cloud, and we will give you the engine to sync. And that's what it's doing. It's allowing you to push items up into the cloud so you can access it for various purposes. So why I talk about ProjectWise a lot is when they introduced this ProjectWise project sharing concept, it kind of opened the door to say, you know what, I can have a cloud-based repository. Now it is Bentley proprietary, but it allows me to pull information from various sources. Bentley as a vendor has been far more open to interoperability than Autodesk has as a vendor, but then Bentley introduces their own proprietary quirks that are not open BIM standard that baffles me beyond belief. So in one breath they're interoperable, then in another breath they have proprietary, and then you have Building Smart as a global international organization saying, you know, you guys are killing us because Bentley, Autodesk, Graphisoft, Nemenschek, CATIA, everybody get on the same table and talk to each other. Because as a BIM professional, I shouldn't care what the authoring tools are. And when we hit that point, it'll be beautiful. Revit Server, I touched on it briefly. This is what it is. Basically, some office, there's a host. Other offices, you have an accelerator, and then you have a bunch of users. So the host is where the office, where the project is owned. So in IBI, we do have several hosts. So let's say it's Calgary and Edmonton in this example. If it's a Calgary project, it's in the Calgary host. If it's an Edmonton project, it's in the Edmonton host. Then there's accelerators in various offices. So it could be Vancouver, Los Angeles, Seattle. And then there's users in those offices. And what the host does is the host caches to the accelerator, and the accelerator is local. So the users are opening and syncing locally. The interweaving process is happening between host and accelerator so that users from various locations are getting almost instantly, oh, you locked the door, I can't touch the door. You move the wall, I now see the moved wall. And that's happening. The struggle we found is twofold. And this is where, because it's physical, is it on a physical server versus a virtual server? How well connected is the virtual server? So we've had some struggles internally where it's been on a virtual server and the actual box that holds all the virtual servers is being packed too much and Revit server's failing. Also WAN connectivity. So is my Revit server, my host is in one location, is my accelerator in India? Is my accelerator in the UAE? That latency will cause a significant problem as well. So keep that in mind. Revit server looks like this though. So implementation is pretty cool for the Revit user. You say file open and you hit the Revit server button down here as opposed to another path. Everything else is the same. C4R, collaboration for Revit. Conceptually, it is just your Revit in the cloud. And the beauty of this is you got a local cache on your system. The local cache is encrypted and it's amazing. It's actually really well encrypted. So when I found it, I shook my head and I said, sure, whatever. The user syncs, all good, and it gets hosted up into the cloud. So some of the drawbacks have been, well, it's in the cloud, it's a little slower when the model is absolutely massive. And we're talking about a gigabyte model. Some users think it's slower than local or Revit server. Very possible. So there's always give and take. LAN, WAN, cloud. When you get to cloud, the convenience of cloud has to be taken in balance with the convenience of, is it super fast versus just fast? Or sometimes, is it super, super fast or just super fast, right? Somebody said to me once, something that took a second to open took 2 seconds. And I said, okay. And yeah, let's move on, right? Now, as I said, Autodesk is going through a branding exercise. So when I made this presentation, it was A360. Now it's called BIM 360 with the later version. Doesn't matter. Same file open. Revit server is at the bottom. This is at the top. You go to your project, open it, and you work. You have the ability to publish, and this is what I was showing you in our hub site. And in the hub, you can then access models and start to interact with them, comment. It's really cool for project managers to say you can just go here and at no cost, because you don't have to pay for a C4R seat, to go in here and actually interact with the model in the live environment. So that's a pretty cool thing. And notice at the bottom right here, I keep changing the icons. This is your centralized database, but cloud hosted. So I say design your approach. Back to here. What's being shared? Where? Who's leading? How do you do it? If we cannot answer those questions, we just simply fail. That's it. No sugarcoating it. No, maybe it'll be okay. We will just fail. And that's it. And we stress that. And we go back and revisit question number 1. And what I've told our BIM coordinators is, don't walk away happy saying, I've got an easy project. Question number 1 will notoriously change throughout the life cycle of the project. Remember that. It's a lot of text, so I'm sorry for that. But the influencers, are we non-Revit, or is it Revit in a non-central? And that's an interesting one as well. A non-central Revit file. And some people say, what the hell is that, right? Well, what if you're making a family? You just double click on a file from the J drive, sorry, from a local server or from ProjectWise and open it. Or what if you're doing a non-central Revit model, a single user? I know that's kind of counterintuitive to what Revit does, but just keep that in mind. When it's Revit, how do you share it? How many users? That's a good question. How many users per model? How many models? How big is the model? Will the users use work sets? Which, as I've discovered, no, we need to element borrow all the time. Sure. How many linkages are there? Is it one model with 100 links? Is it 100 models with minimal links? Is it one big monster model with no links? Pluses and minuses to all of them. Somebody said to me once, yeah, if we have a big model, it's easier because there's less things to manage from a linking perspective. True, but if you have many users in one big massive model, it's harder to share. Keep that in mind. Is it Revit server? Is it ProjectWise? If you're going to use ProjectWise, will users accept the limitations? Is it C4R? Will users understand that they're in the cloud? Will they mitigate, oh my God, the cloud went down, what do I do? So if you've noticed in the BIM 360, or actually with any cloud environment, there's the need to mitigate the fact that, yeah, guess what? Internet might go down. The cloud hosted solution might go down. That's okay. But when it does, as a BIM coordinator, you'll hear it. You'll hear the great failure of, we can't deliver our project, we're not going to meet our budget, people are sitting here idle, how do I run a business when you give me a solution that failed? Is this a new solution? Is it stable? Should we have gone on it to begin with? Heard it all. And I'm using this with the C4R because it's funny, I think the week before Labor Day, it went down 3 days in a row. Now, went down, meaning for 20 minutes, but it went down. I think it was last February. It actually went down for 4 hours, and this was a catastrophic event. Okay, but guess what? It hasn't gone down for a month and a bit now. Nobody has phoned me and said, "Wow, this is great. It's very stable, and we like it." So keep that in mind. At BIM coordinators, you will hear when something is wrong, it's horrible. When it's working fine, everything stays quiet. Hybrid, you will have a hybrid solution. And I think that makes us powerful because we have a toolbox with things we can use. We're not bound by one solution. Okay? I bring this up because I say to people, LAN, WAN, cloud, hybrid, future, I don't know what it's going to be. All of this stuff comes into play, and I've been on projects with it all. I'm not even touching asset management. That's a whole different realm. And IBI has cloud hosted solutions that we use internally. But bit of ProjectWise, bit of your Windows system, your Revit server, it's all there. And you could have a project with all of it. Hint, hint on the assignments. All right? You could have a collaborative solution with multiple pieces. And those are fun. That's what gives us a job, right? If everything worked easily, we wouldn't need BIM coordinators. Remember that. But we're not trying to make work for ourselves. Being mindful of external entities, engage the BIM lead, capture and archive, have things in your toolbox. If I could predict the future, everything will be cloud-based, and there will be a host of hybrid solutions. That's my future predictions. As of today, I'm already doing that. Shared and published introduces a whole different realm of possibilities where it's not just everybody focuses as a BIM coordinator. Here I am in my world of Revit. Here I am in my world of SmartPlant 3D, my world of Civil 3D and AutoCAD. And everybody's happy. Then you say, great, now mix all those up. Hint on those assignments. Oh God, what do? You want me to share building, civil, and plant in one project? My goodness. Now mix that up with shared and published. What do I do now? You want the client, the contractor, you want all these people to interact. How do I do that? Enter the assignment. I hope I'm dropping enough hints on the assignments. But with that said, keep it as simple as possible. So I love that. It's a great duality, right? It's going to be hybrid, potentially complex, but you do want to find that simplest solution. You want to temper expectations, because guess what? There's going to be change. Change is awesome in my opinion, but it seems like the general population are weary of change, and that's what we have to deal with. Scope, schedule, budget are designed to accommodate your collaborative approach. We're going to talk about scope, schedule, budget in a couple of weeks. Talk about project delivery. Then that bleeds into the legal aspects. Scope, schedule, budget is a critical thing, and BIM doesn't happen in isolation. So if, and you'll see in the assignments, if there's criteria that lead you to say, hey, we need this type of solution, then we go to our project managers and say, we got to pay for this. Whether it's on the project, on the office, I don't care if something has to be paid for. All right? So in the assignments, and I added these last three slides at the end, just actually earlier today, because I realized in the assignment, I ask you to do something, and I want to give you a couple examples of what I'm asking you to do. So the assignment itself says to create plausible BIM collaboration solutions for the following examples. And I'm saying create a BIM collaboration diagram with enough, I'll stop highlighting, with enough descriptive text, okay? So it's not an essay, but it's really a picture. Paint me a picture and enough dialogue around it. And the dialogue is basically what I'm gonna show here. So some pictures are complex, some pictures are easy. I'm going to show you complex, I'm going to show you easy, and then I'm going to show you just for fun what I'm struggling with in my day-to-day job right now. So I did this project when I was back at CH2M Health. So based on the criteria that was given to me, which I won't, that could be another day's lecture, we had ProjectWise as our engine. It had building, civil, and plant. Civil was being done in Inroads, which is a Bentley application. Building was being done in EcoSim, which was a Bentley application, and they're able to live reference each other. So think in the world of Revit, and I love stopping right there. Think in your experience with Revit, and we'd say, well, reference in the site. Oh, but it's Civil 3D, it's a terrain, it's a DWG. We don't want to live link DWGs. You could corrupt your Revit model. All the wonderful stuff I hear, and I stand back and say, oh my God, in my world, I would just reference it. Or vice versa, I'm in AutoCAD. Link in your Revit model. Oh, you can't XRef Revit. Okay, hey Revit guys, can you export the building perimeter and like just think of that, and then imagine this where I would be an architect and I'd say, hey Civil, I'm going to link your model. Link, done, beautiful, all happy, one file format. I'm not a Bentley salesman, but there's a lot to that alone as an architect, where I shake my head at Revit. The deliverable was MicroStation. So because MicroStation is Bentley, those two files, they're all DGN, we're all good. In the plant world, there's a lot more stuff. So this is our process mechanical equipment. This was our yard piping, instrumentation and controls, plant electrical. And I can't remember if I showed you guys this in another presentation, but I had my plant space model. It had a SQL database. Very critical for the assignment. Remember that if I'm doing plant and it says there's a database backbone, think about how to share that. Plant space was Bentley, so I was able to link everything. We had this PNID, which was our intelligent PNIDs, and they were able to talk to each other. We had raceway and cable management. It also is DGN, able to talk, all of those links. So you see all of these disciplines were able to share and talk to each other through ProjectWise and deliver in MicroStation. I have a plausible solution. But the crux was that SQL database. So ProjectWise was my cloud. All of these disciplines could talk. This was sitting in an office. Because this is in an office, it had a ramification on my plant people. My plant people all had to be in one location. So that was a challenge. Deliverables, see there we had Civil 3D as well as DGN. Design Review, Navigator, and Adobe. So Adobe 3D PDF. Okay? The AutoCAD piece, the reason we had DWG was because there was a third-party consultant that used Civil 3D. So remember that. Our deliverables are not just the client. So you go and do your EIR, client says, I want MicroStation. In this world, it was great. You can have MicroStation. And then they said, oh, by the way, there's a couple of specialty consultants, engage them. Okay, so the EIR is DGN for owner and talk to stakeholders. You go to talk to stakeholders, of course you want AutoCAD. So we had to do conversions, right? So there was the introduction of Civil 3D, specialty consultant. They had a little piece, had to come back into the project. So this is a collaboration diagram. And you look at that and you say, oh, good Lord, Brent, why? This is another collaboration diagram, a lot simpler. This is a current project that we're doing here at IBI. Revit was on the J drive in one office. Civil 3D was on the J drive in another office. We used sync service. So we used cloud syncing to dump it into ProjectWise, and then our contractor was able to access it. I guess I should have changed the name. You could see who our contractor was there. A lot simpler. We had internal office. What's missing here, so this would be, in my opinion, an incomplete one, because what's missing here is we synced to the cloud for externals. In this diagram, I'm missing the connection between the two offices. So to my BIM coordinator, I remember asking her, how are they talking? How is Revit talking to Civil 3D and vice versa? What's the protocol between the two? So if I go back, what's this line? So what's the description factor between building and civil, between building and plant? In this diagram, what's happening here? Because remember, buildings don't float. They sit on something, and there's a whole host of work being done here, yard piping, utilities, etc., that connect to all the work being done here. Critical, what are my connection points? What are my elevation of my pipes? So as a BIM coordinator, if you're coming with architectural background or buildings background, awesome. Just be cognizant of the fact that there's other connectivity points for these other entities. And then this is where I am today. This is another collaboration diagram. So this is where I'm trying to rationalize shared and published. And in the world of IBI, we have too many shared and published examples. So all of these gray ones are all of the shared and published items that I have. And if you're familiar with any of them, great. Here's my Revit. Great, I've got two options for Revit. There's my normal J drive. We're looking at AConX as a potential hub for shared and published, hence I showed you the example there. Yet I've got all these other solutions. So this could be a project. As a BIM coordinator, I'd scratch my head saying that's so much to manage, but it could be. So projects could be as complicated as that if they had to be. But remember, I said keep it simple. So for the assignment, what I'm looking for is some version of this. And I mean, I think the best approach would be, I like PowerPoint. And the reason I use PowerPoint is because then everything is reusable. So PowerPoint with some notes, upload it into the system. What I've given you are a couple of project types. So there's 3 projects. So I'm looking for three diagrams. And I've given some authoring tools, ramifications of different disciplines that are working on a project. So one's a rail project. One is a water treatment plant. So you have plant. Rail, you have heavy civil. And a high-rise building, you have heavy building. Okay? And I just want you guys to think. That's all. And just think of, you know, the complexities that I've thrown in. And it's no tricks. So, you know, when you look at these, you know, you would say, like, so if your world is Revit, you have a comfort level when I do that. Everything's in Revit. Why did Brent give me this? Okay? So think about that. And I'm not tricking you. So, you know, Revit is your Revit. Here's your Civil 3D, DWG, and here's plain DWG. I'm identifying when I say Civil 3D because you've got those data shortcuts. Okay? Then the complexity of what are you sharing and where? And where is a big one. So Civil 3D data shortcut, Civil, 2 offices. Revit, well, look at all of the firms here I'm saying with Revit, okay? And then the deliverable will help you of the output. Doing the same with each of these. So I'm trying to mix it up. So as a BIM coordinator, I don't want you guys just to be comfortable with Revit. So in this one here, I've thrown in Revit and EcoSim, okay? 20 stations. That whole point, doesn't matter how many stations, the point is there's a lot of stations, okay? It could be 2 stations, Revit for 1, EcoSim for 1. It's gonna be 20 stations. So just think about that. There's gonna be multiple mini projects. Civil, mixed it up a bit. You're gonna have both, and then a bit of AutoCAD, multiple locations. On the plant side, I deliberately threw in smart plants, okay? And I deliberately told you Intergraph is in 1 office, forced. So keep that in mind. And just think of a diagram, think of some of the solutions I've showed. If something is forced to be in an office LAN, it's an office LAN. It's a local server inside an office. So when you're doing those diagrams, think about some of those hints. Again, this is being recorded, so you can go back and say, what the hell did Brent say at the end about his hints? You know, anything of these natures. The PowerPoint, this PowerPoint is on Blackboard. So if you wanted to grab, you know, any one of these and use it as a base, rock on. You know, that's, my point of BIM is everything's open. I want to see how you think about it. I don't care if you use mine as a template, manipulate it and pull it all together just to give you a starting point. If you have something awesome to start with, use it. That would be great. So with that, any questions or comments?
So when is the assignment due? Next week?
It's so, oops, sorry, that's my disturbing email. What is it, the two Wednesdays after? Let me see what, I will, it'll be on the calendar. Let me just hit edit here. I think it's not next, but the following. What did I put here? Sorry. Why am I not seeing it? 18th. So each assignment, when I open it, 2 Wednesdays after is what I've set by default for each of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And keep in mind, like I would say, don't leave it to the end, because I do know, like my fear is that you're going to start getting a snowball of multiple things together. Be mindful that next week I am going to open another quiz, but again, that quiz, it's just like the last time. It's a 10 question quiz. So I would highly, highly advise you know, when I hang up the phone, either the same day, I know it's a Friday night, so that kind of sucks. But shortly thereafter, week 6, just pop in there and answer those 10 questions, because I don't want you guys to get further separated from the dialogue around that. Yeah. And I'd say have fun with this, because for me, I know it sounds disturbing, but finding the technical solution, I think, is probably the most fun of the BIM role. And when I look at these next 2 projects, this assignment focuses on just envisioning that diagram, and that's the whole point, is the diagram. And then the next assignment, which is in 4 weeks from now, will be looking at a technical solution based on some criteria I have posted. So it's really, this one here is testing, okay, I've put a lot of stuff on the table. How could we possibly share? Then the next assignment is, what tools could I assemble to potentially achieve the goal? The last assignment is, how do I develop a unique workflow? So by then, by week 11 or 12, we'll have gone through BIM workflows, making custom or dissecting the workflows. We'll have gone through legal ramifications. So we'll build a workflow based on some potential limiting criteria. And then we'll get into the presentation at the end, which kind of hopefully brings it all together. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, if not, if something comes up afterwards, always feel free to email me, text me. I think I put my phone number on Blackboard, whatever way is best. If you have any questions on the assignment, please just send them my way. I promise I get the Algonquin email on my phone. I will reply instantly to it. So if anything comes up, feel free. But with that, thank you. Have a great Canadian Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun. Bye, everybody.
Bye.